In the dusty archives of Roman military records, buried beneath centuries of imperial propaganda, lies a confession that would shake the very foundations of Roman invincibility. Marcus Claudius Marcellus, one of Rome's most decorated generals, wrote these chilling words to the Senate after his campaigns in Hispania. "Never before have our legions faced such terror. The Iberian blade cuts through our finest armor as if it were mere cloth, and our soldiers flee not from cowardice, but from the certainty of death." What weapon could inspire such fear in the hearts of Roman legionnaires? What blade could make the world's most disciplined military force tremble? The answer lies in a curved piece of steel that emerged from the mountains of ancient Spain, a weapon so deadly that it forced Rome to completely revolutionize its military tactics and equipment. This is not just the story of a sword, but the tale of how a single innovation changed the course of warfare forever and nearly brought the mighty Roman Empire to its knees before it could truly rise. Picture the Iberian Peninsula in the 3rd century before Christ. While most of the Mediterranean world had fallen under Roman influence, this rugged land remained fiercely independent. The tribes of Hispania had developed something extraordinary in their mountain forges, something that would soon earn a reputation as the most feared close combat weapon in the ancient world. The weapon was called the Falcata, and its very design seemed to mock everything Romans believed about warfare. Where Roman gladii were straight and practical, built for the disciplined thrust of formation fighting, the Falcata curved like a predator's claw, designed for devastating slashing attacks that could cleave through helmet, armor, and bone in a single stroke. The blade's unique forward-curving design concentrated tremendous force at the point of impact, creating wounds so severe that Roman physicians struggled to treat them. But this story goes far deeper than metallurgy and blade geometry. The Falcata represented an entirely different philosophy of combat, born from a people who valued individual prowess over collective discipline, who fought not just for territory or tribute, but for the very survival of their ancient way of life. When these two military cultures collided, the results would be catastrophic for Rome and would echo through military history for millennia to come. What makes this tale even more remarkable is how close it came to changing everything. Had the Iberian tribes been able to unite fully behind this devastating weapon, had they possessed the numbers and organization to match their superior technology, the course of Western civilization itself might have been altered forever. Rome's expansion could have been stopped cold in the hills of Spain, and the empire that would dominate the world for centuries might never have risen at all. The Romans themselves understood the significance of what they faced. Archaeological evidence shows that after encountering the Falcata, Roman smiths immediately began experimenting with curved blade designs, trying desperately to replicate the weapon that had proven so effective against their forces. Military manuals from the period described new defensive formations specifically designed to counter the Falcata's devastating overhead strikes. This is the story of how a single weapon nearly changed history, how the curved blade of Hispania became Rome's greatest fear, and how the collision between these two military philosophies would ultimately reshape the nature of ancient warfare itself. To understand why the Falcata struck such terror into Roman hearts, we must journey back to the Iberian Peninsula of the 4th century before Christ, long before Roman sandals had ever touched Spanish soil. The land that would later become Spain and Portugal was home to dozens of fierce tribal confederations, each with their own customs, languages, and most importantly, their own approaches to warfare. The Celtic and Iberian tribes of this region had been perfecting their metallurgical skills for centuries. Unlike the Mediterranean civilizations that relied heavily on bronze, the mountain peoples of Hispania had early access to high-quality iron ore deposits. Their blacksmiths, working in small village forges scattered throughout the Pyrenees and Cantabrian ranges, had developed techniques that wouldn't be matched elsewhere in Europe for generations. But the Falcata wasn't born from accident or simple evolution. Archaeological evidence suggests that the weapon's distinctive design emerged from a very specific tactical need. The Iberian warriors traditionally fought as individual champions rather than in the rigid formations favored by Mediterranean armies. They needed a weapon that could deliver devastating single strikes, something that could end a duel quickly and decisively. The blade itself was a masterpiece of ancient engineering. Measuring between 50 to 60 centimeters in length, the Falcata featured a distinctive forward curve that began about a third of the way down from the hilt. This wasn't merely decorative. The curved design served a brutal mathematical purpose. When swung in an overhead strike, the curve allowed the blade to maintain contact with the target for a longer duration while concentrating enormous force at the point of impact. Roman military engineers, when they finally captured enough examples to study, discovered that the Falcata's design created what modern physics would call compound leverage. The curved blade acted like a mechanical amplifier, multiplying the force of the warrior's swing. A skilled Iberian fighter could generate enough power to split a Roman scutum shield down its center or cleave through a bronze helmet and the skull beneath in a single stroke. The weapon's construction was equally impressive. Iberian smiths had mastered a technique that Roman metallurgists struggled to replicate: differential hardening. The edge of the blade was heated to extreme temperatures and then rapidly cooled, creating a cutting surface harder than anything the Romans could produce. Meanwhile, the spine of the blade was left softer and more flexible, preventing the weapon from shattering under impact. Marcus Porcius Cato, who would later earn fame as Cato the Elder, witnessed firsthand the effectiveness of these weapons during Rome's early encounters with Iberian mercenaries. In his military memoirs, he wrote, "The Hispanian blade cuts through our mail as a farmer's scythe cuts grain. I have seen a single stroke from one of their champions drop 3 men in formation, the blade passing through the first man's shield and armor to strike the second, and the follow-through catching the third." The psychological impact of the Falcata was perhaps even more devastating than its physical capabilities. Roman soldiers were trained to fight in close formation, depending on their shields and the support of their comrades. The Falcata's long reach and devastating power could break these formations apart, forcing individual Romans into single combat where they were hopelessly outmatched. But the weapon's true terror lay not just in its design, but in the men who wielded it. Iberian warriors began training with the Falcata in childhood, developing the extraordinary upper body strength and technique required to use the weapon effectively. They practiced on wooden targets until they could split a post with a single stroke, then moved on to captured enemy armor and shields. The most elite Iberian warriors, known as scuterii, became legendary figures throughout the Mediterranean world. These men could wield their falcatas with such speed and precision that Roman historians describe them as appearing to dance through enemy formations, their curved blades flashing in deadly arcs that no shield wall could withstand. When Rome first encountered organized Iberian resistance during their expansion into southern Spain, the results were catastrophic. The Battle of Silva Latana in 215 before Christ saw an entire Roman army destroyed by Iberian and Gallic forces, with survivors reporting that the curved swords of the Hispanians had cut through their formations, like wolves through sheep. The Roman military establishment was shaken to its core. For centuries, the gladius and scutum combination had proven invincible against every enemy from Gallic warriors to Greek hoplites. Now, suddenly, they faced a weapon that seemed to render their entire military system obsolete. Desperate Roman commanders began experimenting with new tactics and equipment. They reinforced their shields with iron bands, modified their helmets to better deflect overhead strikes, and even began training their soldiers to fight with longer spears to keep the deadly falcatas at a distance. Before we explore how Rome ultimately adapted to this terrifying new threat, let me make a quick invitation. If you're new to the channel and you're enjoying the content so far, subscribe and click like to help the channel grow. Now, let's return to ancient Spain, where Roman blood was beginning to stain the Iberian mountains red. The crisis reached its peak when Hannibal began recruiting Iberian mercenaries for his war against Rome. Suddenly, the weapon that had been contained within the Spanish peninsula was marching toward Italy itself, carried by some of the finest warriors in the ancient world. Roman intelligence reports from this period speak of desperate attempts to hire Iberian smiths to craft falcatas for Roman use, but few were willing to betray their people's secrets. Archaeological excavations in former Roman camps throughout Spain have uncovered dozens of broken Roman weapons, their iron blades shattered by impacts from superior Iberian steel. Some sites contain evidence of mass weapon burials, Roman commanders disposing of their broken equipment rather than allowing word of their inferior armaments to spread. But what no one expected was that the conflict between Roman discipline and Iberian innovation would soon reveal a vulnerability in the falcata itself, a weakness that would ultimately allow Rome to turn the tide of battle. But what no one expected was that the very design that made the falcata so devastating would also contain the seeds of its own downfall, and that Roman military genius would find a way to turn the weapon's greatest strength into its greatest weakness. The weakness that would ultimately doom the falcata was discovered not by Roman generals, but by Roman common soldiers bleeding in the dust of Spanish battlefields. It was a centurion named Gaius Fabius Budio who first noticed something crucial during a particularly brutal engagement near modern-day Cartagena in 209 before Christ. As Iberian warriors charged his formation with their terrible curved blades raised high, Budio observed that the devastating overhead strikes that made the falcata so feared also left its wielders momentarily vulnerable. The weapon's design, which concentrated so much force at the point of impact, required its user to commit fully to each attack. Unlike the Roman gladius, which could thrust, parry, and strike in rapid succession, the falcata demanded complete commitment to each swing. Budio's observation would prove revolutionary. But first, Rome had to survive the greatest crisis in its history. When Hannibal crossed the Alps in 218 before Christ, he brought with him over 8,000 Iberian warriors armed with falcatas. These weren't just any fighters. They were the elite scuterii, hand-picked veterans who had spent decades perfecting their deadly art. The impact was immediate and catastrophic. At the Battle of Trebia, Roman survivors described scenes of pure horror as Iberian warriors carved through their ranks. One account, preserved in the writings of Polybius, tells of a single Iberian champion who killed 17 Roman soldiers in as many minutes, his falcata moving in deadly arcs that no Roman could match or counter. But it was at Cannae where the true terror of the falcata was unleashed upon the Roman world. Hannibal positioned his Iberian veterans at key points in his formation, using them as human wedges to split Roman units apart. Archaeological evidence from the battlefield shows the effectiveness of their assault. Roman shields bearing characteristic curved gashes, helmets split cleanly in half, and armor pieces that tell the story of devastating single strikes. Marcus Varro, one of the few Roman commanders to survive Cannae, wrote in his report to the Senate, "The Hispanian blade renders our training worthless. Our soldiers know not how to defend against strikes that come from such angles, with such force. It is as if they fight with the very wrath of their gods made manifest in steel." The crisis deepened when reports began arriving from Spain itself. Publius Cornelius Scipio and his brother Gnaeus, leading the Roman forces in Hispania, were struggling desperately against the combined forces of Carthaginian professionals and Iberian tribal warriors. Their dispatches paint a picture of Roman military doctrine in complete disarray. The traditional Roman formation, the manipular system that had conquered Italy, proved catastrophically inadequate against falcata-wielding opponents. The weapon's reach and power could break through the gaps between maniples, turning Rome's tactical flexibility into a deadly weakness. Worse still, the psychological effect was devastating. Roman soldiers began to lose confidence in their equipment and training. Desperate measures were taken in Rome itself. The Senate authorized the creation of special training schools where captured Iberian weapons were studied and countermeasures developed. Roman smiths worked frantically to modify equipment, creating reinforced shields and experimenting with longer gladii that might match the falcata's reach. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. It was during the siege of Saguntum that a young Roman officer named Publius Scipio Africanus, not yet bearing that honorific title, witnessed something that would change everything. During a fierce assault, he saw an Iberian warrior's falcata become lodged in a Roman shield. The curved design that made the weapon so devastating also made it difficult to withdraw quickly from certain angles. Scipio immediately grasped the tactical implications. He began experimenting with new shield designs and fighting techniques specifically engineered to exploit this weakness. His innovations were revolutionary. Shields with reinforced rims designed to catch and trap falcata blades, and new gladius techniques that emphasized rapid thrusting attacks during the brief moments when an Iberian warrior was recovering from a missed swing. The new tactics were first tested at the Battle of Becula in 208 before Christ. Scipio's reformed legions, now trained specifically to counter the falcata, achieved something that had seemed impossible. They defeated a force of veteran Iberian warriors in open combat. The key was timing and coordination. Roman soldiers worked in pairs, one using his shield to trap or deflect a falcata strike while his partner moved in for a killing thrust. Archaeological evidence from Becula shows the effectiveness of these new techniques. Unlike earlier battlefields littered with shattered Roman equipment, Becula reveals a roughly equal distribution of Roman and Iberian casualties, suggesting that Rome had finally found a way to match the terrible curved blade. But even as Roman tactics evolved, the falcata continued to extract a terrible price. The weapon's psychological impact remained devastating, and many Roman soldiers continued to flee rather than face Iberian warriors in single combat. Disciplinary records from this period show a sharp increase in charges of cowardice and desertion, particularly among units that had faced falcata-wielding opponents. The true test came at the Battle of Ilipa in 206 before Christ, where Scipio faced the largest concentration of Iberian warriors ever assembled. Over 15,000 falcata-wielding fighters supporting the Carthaginian cause. Roman military manuals describe the preparation for this battle in extraordinary detail, showing how completely Roman tactical doctrine had been transformed by the threat of the curved blade. Scipio's legions were arranged in a completely new formation, with specialized anti-falcata units at key points. Each Roman soldier carried modified equipment: shields reinforced with bronze strips, helmets with extended neck guards, and gladii that had been lengthened and weighted for better penetrating power. Most importantly, they had trained for months in the new techniques designed to exploit the falcata's singular weakness. The battle itself was a revelation. For the first time since Rome had encountered the weapon, their soldiers stood firm against Falcata charges. The new tactics worked brilliantly. Roman pairs would engage individual Iberian warriors, one soldier absorbing or deflecting the devastating overhead strike while his partner moved in for the kill. But victory came at a tremendous cost. Even with their new techniques and equipment, Roman casualties were staggering. The medical reports from Ilipa describe wounds unlike anything Roman physicians had previously encountered. Devastating cuts that had been partially deflected but still caused horrific damage. The Iberian defeat at Ilipa marked a turning point, but it wasn't the end of the Falcata's reign of terror. Scattered tribes throughout the peninsula continued to resist Roman occupation, and their curved blades continued to claim Roman lives for decades to come. What had changed was Rome's ability to fight effectively against the weapon, not the weapon's fundamental deadliness. Intelligence reports from Roman commanders in the years following Ilipa reveal a grudging respect for both the weapon and the warriors who wielded it. Many Romans began privately collecting falcatas as trophies, studying their construction and marveling at the metallurgical skill required to create such devastating implements. However, the greatest revelation was yet to come. Roman engineers studying captured falcatas made a discovery that would shock the military establishment and reveal just how close Rome had come to facing an even more terrible threat. However, what was about to be discovered would surpass all expectations and reveal secrets that had remained hidden for millennia. The falcata was not the ultimate expression of Iberian weaponcraft, but merely the beginning of something far more terrifying. The discovery that would revolutionize Roman understanding of Iberian metallurgy came in 204 before Christ, when Roman engineers finally gained access to the legendary forges of Toledo. What they found there defied everything they thought they knew about ancient weapon-making and revealed just how sophisticated Iberian technology had become. Deep within the mountain workshops, Roman smiths discovered that the Iberians had been experimenting with steel alloys that wouldn't be rediscovered in Europe for another 1,000 years. The most advanced falcatas weren't simply iron weapons. They were composite blades incorporating techniques that modern metallurgists would recognize as early forms of pattern welding and differential tempering. Marcus Crassus Dives, the Roman military engineer who led the investigation, wrote in his classified report to the Senate, "The Hispanian smiths have achieved what our finest craftsmen declared impossible. They forge blades of such hardness that they can cut through our best armor, yet with such flexibility that they will not shatter under the most violent impacts. This is not mere craftsmanship. This approaches the realm of divine knowledge." The most shocking discovery was a cache of experimental weapons that revealed the true scope of Iberian innovation. Among these prototype blades were falcatas with serrated edges designed to cause maximum tissue damage, weapons with weighted tips that could punch through the heaviest Roman armor, and most terrifying of all, curved blades that had been designed specifically to counter Roman tactical adaptations. Archaeological evidence suggests that Iberian smiths had been studying captured Roman equipment just as intensively as Romans had been studying falcatas. They had developed countermeasures to Scipio's new tactics, creating weapons with modified grips that allowed for faster recovery, and blades with specialized cutting angles designed to slice through the reinforced Roman shields. But the ultimate revelation came when Roman engineers discovered the plans for what Iberian smiths called the Falcata Perfecta, the perfect falcata. This weapon would have incorporated every lesson learned from decades of combat against Roman forces. The blade featured a revolutionary double-curve design that would have made it virtually impossible to trap or deflect, while maintaining all the devastating cutting power of the original weapon. Fortunately for Rome, the Falcata Perfecta never made it beyond the prototype stage. The Roman conquest of the Toledo forges came just months before large-scale production was scheduled to begin. Had the Iberians succeeded in arming their warriors with these ultimate weapons, Roman expansion into Spain might have been stopped permanently. The psychological impact of these discoveries on Roman military leadership cannot be overstated. They realized that they had been fighting not primitive tribal warriors, but a technologically advanced civilization whose weaponsmiths were centuries ahead of their time. General Titus Quinctius Flamininus, upon reading the reports from Toledo, reportedly declared, "We have not conquered Hispania through superior tactics or courage, but through the favor of the gods alone." The revelations from Toledo forced Rome to completely re-evaluate their approach to military technology. For the first time in Roman history, they began actively recruiting foreign craftsmen not as slaves, but as technical advisors. Iberian smiths who agreed to share their knowledge were granted Roman citizenship and generous pensions, while those who refused faced execution. This marked the beginning of what historians would later call the Great Adaptation, a systematic Roman effort to incorporate foreign military innovations into their own arsenal. The lessons learned from studying the falcata would eventually influence the development of the spada, the longer cavalry sword that would become standard throughout the later Roman Empire. But the impact went far beyond weapons technology. Roman military doctrine itself was permanently transformed by the encounter with the Falcata. The rigid formations that had conquered the Mediterranean were replaced by more flexible tactical systems that could adapt to unexpected threats. The trauma of facing the curved blade had taught Rome a crucial lesson about military innovation and adaptation. Archaeological excavations throughout the former Roman Empire reveal the lasting influence of Iberian weaponcraft. Roman-made falcatas have been found in sites from Britain to Egypt, suggesting that the weapon was adopted and adapted for use throughout the empire. Some of these Roman copies show clear improvements over the original design, indicating that Roman smiths had not only learned to replicate Iberian techniques but had begun to advance them. The most remarkable discovery came in 1987, when archaeologists excavating a Roman fort in northern England uncovered a weapons cache containing what appeared to be experimental curved blades. Carbon dating revealed that these weapons had been manufactured in the 2nd century after Christ, more than 300 years after the conquest of Spain. Roman smiths had continued to refine and develop the Falcata design long after the original Iberian resistance had been crushed. DNA analysis of metal samples from these later weapons shows that Roman smiths had solved many of the manufacturing challenges that had limited Iberian production. They had developed new smelting techniques that allowed for more consistent steel quality and had created standardized production methods that could equip entire legions with curved blades when needed. Perhaps most significantly, the encounter with the Falcata fundamentally changed Roman attitudes toward military innovation. Before facing the curved blade, Roman military thinking had been conservative and traditional. The trauma of nearly being defeated by a superior weapon system forced Rome to embrace a culture of continuous military adaptation that would serve them well in their later conquests. The influence of the Falcata can be traced through subsequent Roman campaigns. When they encountered new enemies with unusual weapons or tactics, Roman commanders no longer simply relied on traditional formations and equipment. Instead, they actively studied enemy innovations and developed specific countermeasures, often incorporating the best foreign techniques into their own arsenal. This adaptive approach proved crucial during Rome's later expansion into Germania, where they faced warriors with long slashing swords similar to the Falcata. The lessons learned in Spain allowed Roman forces to quickly develop effective tactics against these new threats, preventing another military crisis. The legacy of the curved blade extended far beyond military applications. Roman engineering projects began incorporating Iberian metallurgical techniques, leading to stronger tools and more durable construction materials. The road-building projects that connected the empire were made possible in part by superior iron tools created using knowledge gained from studying Iberian weaponcraft. Modern archaeological techniques have revealed just how profound this technological transfer was. Chemical analysis of Roman metalwork from the 1st century after Christ shows clear evidence of Iberian-derived techniques being used in everything from agricultural tools to architectural hardware. The knowledge gained from studying the Falcata had revolutionized Roman material culture. But perhaps the most lasting impact was psychological. The encounter with the Falcata had shattered Roman assumptions about their own military supremacy and forced them to confront the reality that other civilizations might possess superior technology. This humility, born from the terror of facing an enemy with better weapons, would serve Rome well in their future encounters with foreign powers. The curved blade that had once made Rome tremble had ultimately made Rome stronger. By forcing the empire to adapt and innovate, the Falcata had contributed to the very military flexibility that would allow Rome to dominate the ancient world for centuries to come. Yet in the quiet moments between campaigns, veteran Roman soldiers would still speak in hushed tones about the terrible curved swords of Hispania, and the warriors who had wielded them with such deadly skill. The story of the Falcata is ultimately a testament to one of history's most profound truths. Innovation, not numbers or tradition, determines the outcome of human conflict. This curved blade from the mountains of ancient Spain did more than just kill Roman soldiers. It fundamentally transformed the most powerful military machine in the ancient world and, in doing so, changed the course of Western civilization itself. Think about the extraordinary journey we've witnessed. A weapon born in tribal forges challenged the might of Rome at its peak, forced the empire to abandon centuries of military tradition, and ultimately contributed to the very adaptability that would make Roman dominance possible. The Iberians may have lost their political independence, but their technological genius lived on in every Roman innovation that followed. The Falcata's legacy extends far beyond ancient battlefields. The principle it embodied, that superior technology can overcome superior numbers, would echo through military history from the longbow at Agincourt to the machine gun at the Somme. Every military revolution since has followed the same pattern. An innovative weapon appears, traditional forces struggle to adapt, and ultimately the entire nature of warfare evolves. Perhaps most remarkably, the Falcata crisis taught Rome a lesson that modern nations are still learning. The deadliest enemy of military success is not foreign armies, but internal complacency. Rome's near defeat in Spain came not from facing overwhelming numbers or superior strategy, but from encountering a technology they had never imagined possible. Their salvation lay not in stubbornly maintaining tradition, but in humble acknowledgement that they had something to learn from their enemies. The archaeological evidence we've explored reveals that this technological humility became embedded in Roman military culture. 4 centuries after the conquest of Spain, Roman commanders continued to study and adapt foreign weapons and tactics. This intellectual flexibility, born from the trauma of facing the curved blade, would prove crucial in Rome's later conquests of Gaul, Britain, and Germania. But the story of the Falcata also serves as a sobering reminder of opportunities lost to division and mistrust. Had the Iberian tribes been able to unite fully behind their technological advantage, had they possessed the political organization to match their metallurgical genius, the Roman Empire might never have risen at all. The weapon that could have stopped Rome was ultimately defeated not by superior Roman tactics, but by Iberian disunity. This historical lesson resonates powerfully in our modern world, where technological innovation moves faster than ever before. Nations and organizations that fail to adapt to new realities, that cling to outdated methods simply because they have always worked, risk the same fate that nearly befell Rome in the hills of ancient Spain. The curved blade that once made legions tremble now rests silent in museum cases, but its message remains as sharp as ever. In a world where change is the only constant, survival belongs not to the strongest or the largest, but to those wise enough to learn from their enemies and humble enough to admit when their old ways are no longer sufficient. The Falcata's greatest victory was not any single battle, but the transformation of Rome itself from a rigid military machine into an adaptable empire capable of learning and growing. In teaching Rome to fear, it ultimately taught Rome to survive. If you made it this far and you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now, hit the like button, and share in the comments what you think would have happened if the Iberian tribes had successfully united behind the Falcata Perfecta. See you in the next video.